Hello and welcome to This Week in MedIT, your source for medical technology news, brought to you by C&G Technologies. We have featured updates and benefits of EMR EHR, but how do you become compliant? C&G Technologies can be a resource through this EMR EHR video.
If you are going to look to implement EHR and EMR for 2012, you have 61 days before you start your 90-day meaningful use criteria. If you don't bill Medicare and Medicaid, you might not care that much about this from the standpoint of getting any incentive money, because if you don't bill them, you will not receive any. It's actually 3/4 of the amount you bill for the maximum of that year. For example, if you were going to go to Medicare for this year, the maximum that you could receive back, I believe, is $18,000, which means you have to bill at least $24,000 in order to receive that back. If you're in all cash, like we had spoke to another individual here, that's nothing you need to worry about from the standpoint of implementing on their timeline. The stick that the government has proposed is starting in 2015 for Medicare, they will now start debiting 1% in an aggregate over 5 years, going up to 5% of the amount you bill them. So if you end up billing them for $100,000, you'll end up receiving back $95,000. So there's the stick part of it, and there are some other gotchas related to that depending on how many of the eligible providers, and it has to be at least 75%, typically over 3 years, before they implement the 5%, otherwise they'll cap it at 3%. So you have 61 days for 2012. However, most consultants will tell you that it takes anywhere from 6 to 18 months in order to implement EHR and EMR in a larger practice. I know I've talked to an individual here who's alone. There's one person in the practice, and I can see that person probably can implement it in a matter of probably 8 weeks pretty easily, because there is software that you can get online using software as a service, a web browser, and just go sign up. The costs can range anywhere from necessarily free per month, but you're going to get advertising to do that, and it might not be software that's really relegated more for like chiropractic. It could be much more for a general practitioner, so it might not work for you, all the way up to something that's incredibly expensive and not something that's really appropriate for you. So the first year that you implement, that we're talking about here, you must have 90 days of meaningful use. And what that means is that you basically have bought the software, installed the software, and you're using the software appropriately. There are a total of 15 items that most doctors need to show that they implement, and there's another set of 10 of which you have to choose 5. But this includes things where you're writing prescriptions, which chiropractors don't do. So they actually get out of some of these. So you have to understand specifically for what your practice is, whether or not you fit under these. And so that would be something that you need to look at as well. We'll go to the next one. So now we got a little bit of the time and a couple more items. 2014, last year that you can implement for meaningful use and actually start getting any of the incentive. 2015 for Medicare is basically when the stick comes in. Medicaid, 2016 is the last year to start to actually return money. So how do I become compliant? The really short version is buy software, install the software, prove meaningful use. That's the really short version. So we're going to go to the next 6 steps. And what we're going to show is, in the first step, you're trying to assess your practice. And the 3 items that you're really concerned about when you assess your practice is going to be your personnel, your processes, and your technology. Related to your personnel, if you have a practice with people, some of you are alone, but if you have people, you need to understand, are they computer savvy enough to implement this? Are you going to have to move them up to get accustomed to it? Are you going to have problems with people's attitude? Are they going to look at this software and go, great, one more thing that I have to deal with? Is that going to be a problem? And if you do, you know who that's going to be. That's going to be sniping in the back. You have to deal with this. This is where you're going to be assessing your people. And then you're going to be looking at your processes. What is efficient? Is this something that you need to do? And look at the items that are requirements for the meaningful use. And do you have any processes? For example, do you take the necessary data, whether it's blood pressure or whatever that you have to do, Do you do it now? And if you don't, you have to put it into your practices. And if your processes are inefficient, for goodness sakes, don't put an inefficient into a software program. Software is there to make things run more efficiently, and you will be doing a bad process more efficiently. And then you will have to eventually fix it, which rip it out of the software. Not going to be very good for your budget, quite frankly. So then we're going to plan your approach. And you're going to look at tasks, and you're going to look at which tasks are the most important that I need to do, which tasks do I need to do in what order, and then how am I going to communicate that amongst all of my team members. And so one of the items to look at when you look at this is to go, okay, I need to move these tasks and processes into 3 buckets. And so I ask myself these items, which tasks or processes am I going to start during this process? Which ones am I ending? And which ones am I sustaining? And am I communicating this to everybody that it needs to be communicated to? So you're looking at your project plan, you're implementing this over time, what you need to do, because you've looked at the resource, or you've looked at the tasks that you need to do for meaningful use and applying that. So when you're going to select or upgrade to a certified EHR, if you are not going to be looking to get incentives, you don't need to worry about it being certified. Having said that, there are 2 types of certifications. The software can be certified under what's called a module, which means it does an aspect of the EHR and EMR, or complete, which means it can handle everything that you need to do. If you presently have software, or you intend to buy just the module, it means you're going to have to buy 1 or more modules along with it in order to be complete. And then you are responsible for taking all of these modules and going to the necessary government agency and say, would you please certify all of these modules together as complete? It's on your back that you have to deal with that. So while some people use what's called best of breed, which is what gathering a bunch of modules together is, others will agree I'd rather not take the headache and just buy a complete one. And the downside of that, of course, is it might not be as strong in a certain area as something you've presently used. The other one is that the software that you presently use right now, check into it and make sure whether or not they have a certified version. Maybe you can upgrade to it. It's something to look into. Now, during this process, one of the major points of this stage that's going to allow you to keep your budget as effective as possible is your negotiation stage. Now there, if you go to calhispa.org, one of the things you're going to do is find out that they have already negotiated with certain vendors 4 requirements, and one of those requirements is how much training do you get? If you have any people on your staff, you're going to want to really make sure that you have adequate training as part of your package that you're buying to help them. And that is certainly one of the places where if you don't pay attention to that line item, all of a sudden your costs go way up because your people need to be trained, and it's going to be potentially challenging to do that. Another one is, as we go to stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, what is it going to cost you for your software to be moved to stage 2 and stage 3? You want to negotiate that that's part of it. And then how are you going to implement that? And we're going to talk just a second about the hardware. So conducting the training, implementing the EHR, so it's in place, and you have to start worrying about the 90 days. You also have to worry about transferring all this data, all of your charts and all of the other stuff into the system so that you can become paperless. So one of your concerns will be certainly your staff. If you have them, you might have to go out and get some part-time workers to help move that data in. So be aware of this as part of your project, part of your budgeting. So you achieve meaningful use. What's one of the stages? Now you have to actually go back to the government and put all the paperwork in. Now, if you start October 3rd of this year and you get your 90 days, you have approximately 2 months in order to get all that paperwork in. So it doesn't have to end December 31st, get your paperwork. You have part of 2013. And then finally, EHR and EMR and the whole process is actually to help benefit the health of America. And it's also help your particular practice become more efficient. So consider that you want to do this again. You want to look at your processes again. You want to move to the next stage again. Next question. What type of technology do I need to be compliant? And this actually is very similar to saying, I'd like a house built, and that's all you tell them. It's nothing that we can necessarily answer for you right up here on stage, because I would need to know certain things, which including, are we talking in-house or software as a service? And what that means is, are we looking at software that you want to have on site? Are you going to have what's called a client-server architecture, meaning that you have all of your machines and there's a server on site with the data, and that's how the architecture is? Or are we going to do SaaS, where you're actually going out to a website and you're plugging everything in? They have the servers, they have the databases. All you need to have is a really good browser and a good internet connection, but you don't have access to your data. If they go down, your data's gone. So there are some trade-offs with both of those, of which way that you'd like to accomplish this. It's also kind of dependent on size of practice. You know, if you're going to go in-house, that is going to be much more expensive from a support standpoint. Software as a service, you can go just out. Computer architecture. If you have some older machines, one of the ways you could actually architect this and not necessarily have to throw them all out is called virtualization. And so I just want to explain to you that there are different ways to try to recoup some of your existing technology with something that's come along. You know, we would ask the questions, or any technical company, it can be C&G, it can be another one, but we would ask the questions what you want to accomplish. We'll ask you, are we going to stay in-house because you like the data here? Are we going to go software as a service? If it's software as a service, we might be able to say, hey, look, you can use this if we're going to, you know, adjust your security and you have redundant pipes going to the internet, meaning that if someone were to cut one of your internet connection lines, another one's still available. So implementation of tablets. Are you considering that the tablets are the future and you're done with laptops and you're done with hard drives and boxes and everything else? Well, talk to us about the implementation of tablets. You know, what is it going to mean there from a security? What if you drop them? You know, is the browser going to work correctly that you have on the tablet that you're selecting with the particular software that you're using? And finally, security. We all have to worry about it. We all have to consider whether or not someone's going to be able to see something, do something that we're going to get in trouble for. And so if you choose in-house, the security aspects of that are different than if you go software as a service. And if you go SaaS, you have to consider, are we secured between here and there? Are we secured if anyone tries to hack us here? And so I would really encourage you to talk to a technology company related to the security aspects of doing this. So who makes the EHR and EMR? And frankly, this is the kind of worst question of all. There are, if you include both certified module and certified complete, there are 2,400-ish different choices. So there are different options that are coming out here. Where can you go to get a list of this? Here, you'll be able to list some of those requirements, and it'll give you a list without getting a phone call. We would certainly encourage you to call us. We'd love to tell you about the solutions that we have access to or just can talk about. So hopefully we've answered some of the questions. If you're not going to be working with Medicare and Medicaid, it's not something you have to do. There are some caveats and some warnings. Even if you don't work with them, the concern is that your patients in the future will start depending on the features and functionality of an EHR and EMR solution in order to be able to say, hey, I like going to Dr. A because I know I have access to all of my data. If I go to Dr. B who's not implemented this, I don't. And if I go on vacation and I get hurt and I'm in the ER, I know that if I go to Dr. A, they can go and grab all of my data because I don't remember anything. And you know, speaking about blood type and everything else, that's kind of me. You know, I don't remember all of those things. I unfortunately do not remember all of the different aspects of my children. Yet if I know that I go to a doctor that has this type of stuff, I don't have to worry about it. And so I do feel that there's still some value to it for you to consider it. I hope that this has been helpful. Please ask us. We'd love to answer any of your questions, and have a great evening.